Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and we are continuing the segment that I did for my previous video regarding NHL Enforcers that I did with actor and comedian Earl Skakel. Such a great guy. I'm so happy to be friends with him. He is not just a actor and comedian, but he's a diehard hockey fan with a 700 game-worn jersey collection, and they're all NHL Enforcers. So you want to talk about a guy that has knowledge regarding not just the game of hockey, but NHL Enforcers, look no further than Earl Skakel. I can't wait to get in this conversation with him. We'll be giving out our honorable mentions from our previous video regarding the top 10 NHL Enforcers of all time. Make sure to check that video out if you haven't already after this one, and make sure you stay tuned until the end of the video. Find out all the deets and all our thoughts regarding our honorable mentions and really the evolution of what it means to be an NHL Enforcer from really the 70s all the way up to present day. Such a great conversation. I can't wait to get into it, and thank you guys for hitting like and subscribe in advance. It means an absolute ton.
Got it.
All right, round two. So I think if you want to start off, if you want to give just a little intro about yourself again, I know that you feel like a broken record at this point probably, but for anyone that doesn't know you as well, I've touched on everything regarding just your hockey fandom as well, and your jersey collection is truly remarkable. But if there's anything else you want to add, by all means, go ahead.
Well, I never get tired of talking about myself. So, if you like Comedy Central, I've been on their show Roast Battle. If you like cartoons, I'm on Tyler, the Creator's The Jellies on Adult Swim.
Awesome cartoon.
Oh, thank you. And if you like Rob Schneider, who doesn't like Rob Schneider? You can do it. I was on his Netflix show, Real Rob. And I was also on I'm Dying Up Here on Showtime, which is a loose documentary about the Comedy Store. Well, it's a docudrama. It wasn't an actual documentary. That ran for 2 seasons. And, hopefully if you're an LA listener, you've seen me at the Comedy Store in West Hollywood many times. And hope you see me again many more times when this wackiness is over.
Yeah, no, exactly. And seriously, it's been a privilege to become friends with you here and just really going ahead with your brain with how much hockey knowledge you have is beyond me. I've never met someone like you, and I'm not even trying to say that put you in an uncomfortable position, but just between your fandom, your collection, and just how composed you've been with having a steady fandom throughout your entire career is truly unprecedented in my mind. But let's just start off quick. I think we could give a quick summary as to our honorable mentions from our previous video, our plus long video regarding the top 10 NHL Enforcers of all time. So for any of you guys that checked that out, thank you. If you haven't and you're interested, make sure you do after this video. But Earl, when it comes to honorable mentions, what are the first guys that stand out to you? Oh, you have yourself muted quick, Earl.
Oh, hello?
You're good.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I don't know how that happened. Must be the devil or something. This is almost as controversial as the top 10 list because, there's probably literally 50 guys who we could say should have been in the top 20 or top 10, and it depends what you look at. If some people value guys who fight a lot, they don't care about the record. Some people really care about the record. So I would say the first guy on my list who should really be in the top 15 to 20 guys, and it's controversial because a lot of the younger fans aren't going to know who he is, but a young Larry Playfair.
I knew you were going to say him. Yeah.
He was one of the first bigger players. He was 6'3", 6'4", I think. It had to have been at least 215, 220-ish. Of course, he looked much bigger because all the other guys weren't as big. But when he was younger, more specifically in his Buffalo days versus his LA days where he was, injured a lot, he was brutal. He was very tough. He beat up Chris Nyland several times, who was one of the tops of his era. Not quite good enough to get in the top 10, but he could, put it this way, a prime Larry Playfair could beat a lot of guys in the top 10 we listed.
Yeah, You know, and again, it's one of those things where, like, if say you asked me maybe 6 months to a year from now, what would my list be? It would probably be different because it just how subjective it is at the end of the day. And the more you get knowledgeable about players, but again, I love this topic because when it comes to enforcers, and we're going to expand on them shortly regarding just the evolution, I would say probably from the 70s to present day, why it isn't as prominent in today's NHL. You know, who were the biggest, heavier hitters from each decade, if you will. But a guy like Playfair really stands out, no question. For me personally, as you alluded to before, as we were discussing this video topic before actually recording, Nick Fatiou definitely stands out to me. Nick Fatiou, such an awesome story. If you guys don't know him, originally a New York Ranger, was the first New York Ranger to be drafted actually being New York born. You know, he's the first homegrown talent to come into the Rangers organization, which is so awesome to think about. But such a gritty player he was. He was not an easy guy to grow up against by any means. Had some fantastic moments in Rangers history, no doubt in my mind. And is there anything you would like to add on Fatiou before we get to some other guys quick?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, not. I know we're don't want to spend like an hour on each guy, which I probably could. But Theo was really one of the first guys who fought technically, because I believe he was a Golden Gloves champion. So if you ever watch any,
he was. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I forgot if he was a champion or he fought in the Golden Gloves. Either one's impressive to me. If you watch any of his fights, there's actual technique. Like he'll throw jabs to set up the big punches, or he'll throw body shots with uppercuts. And like, most guys would just hold on with one hand and throw with the other. He was a cerebral enforcer. He would look at you and go, okay, like, let's just say he was going to fight Joey Koser and they never fought. He would go, okay, he throws the most with his right, so I'm going to tie up his right and throw jabs with the left, setting up a right for me. Like he put a lot of thought into his fights. Not the biggest guy, but big for his era. And he had a lot of great fights with the Flyers, of course, which is funny because I think toward the end of his career, he ended up on the Flyers. So definitely someone who younger fans, once again, I know I'm saying that a lot, won't probably respect as much as they should, but he was a very, very tough guy.
Yeah, he was, and it's really unfortunate. I wish that I could have lived through the era in which, he was playing live, because as a Rangers fan personally, as I am a hockey fan, but Rangers are my main team, for guys that don't know, that are watching this, just Fatiou had a huge impact in everything that my father told me about him and other family members. It is definitely something that I wished I could have been a part of, but I'm glad that we have this great thing called YouTube here, among other things, where I can check these things out. But another guy that really stands out to me, and is definitely one that many people would argue is deserving of being in their top 10, and I'll let you run with this one, is Tony Twist.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was a very strong guy. Of course, I think he might have been pharmaceutically enhanced at times. But that doesn't necessarily help you be a better fighter.
Correct.
I think
you still need to learn these tools at the end. It's same thing, and not to go on a tangent here, but when it comes to PEDs in any sport, take baseball for instance, Barry Bonds. Barry Bonds wasn't the player that he was because of his roids. One, he was a fantastic player beforehand, and two, just when he got in the latter years of his career, it just helped him kind of stay put and take advantage of the opportunity. But he still needed to time those swings. He still needed to have that ultimate power and everything. His vision was fantastic. So I just want to add that quick, because it really bothers me when people say, regarding specific sports as well, that PEDs is the only reason why they had success. I'm like, no, they still have to train literally their quote unquote asses off. So
oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that Tony Twist is one of the most intimidating fighters of all time, because he was so big. Like, if you saw him without his jersey on, it's like, my God, I don't want to fight this guy. But oddly enough, he never really hurt guys. Koser ended careers. Dave Brown hurt guys. Clark Gillies essentially broke Hospodar's face. you never really saw Twist like damage guys, but he would ragdoll a lot of guys because he was just so much stronger than most players. So it's funny that he may or may not have been on PEDs, but it didn't really seem to help him. But a tough guy. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever put him in any top 10, but I certainly wouldn't want to fight him.
Yeah, exactly. And there's two other guys that just stand out to me from the players I have listed here. And there's obviously a huge list we could go down, but I'll give you two more here that we could expand on. And if there's any more that you would like to go after that, that's fine. And then we will just get right into basically the evolution of Enforcers and really the manipulation they've had when it comes to their jerseys, including the one hanging behind you. I'm looking forward to discussing that as well. So, but two guys that obviously stand out that we talked about in the top 10 rankings as well, even though he wasn't there, was Rob Ray, and the other is Donald Brashear. So if you want to go ahead and kind of run with those two, by all means, please do.
Oh, sure. I mean, Rob Ray, smaller guy, kind of in that Ty Domi height, weight range. But, he beat Dave Brown in fight famously. So one of the few fights that you could say Dave Brown visually lost. It's probably under 10 fights that Brown lost, straight up. You brought up jerseys, and I know we're going to talk about that later. He didn't tie down his shirt, so it was kind of an unfair advantage he had in a lot of his early fights in Buffalo, where guys would, grab at his collar or maybe the back and they'd pull and the shirt would just come off. And he wore very small shoulder and elbow pads. So he was basically naked from the waist up. And so it was a very unfair advantage that he had. But, a lot of guys were doing it, like I mentioned before in the first part of this conversation. Basil McRae had Velcro sleeves. Dave Brown had the custom shortened sleeves. So I ding Rob Ray a little bit for the jersey, but he was a great fighter, very powerful puncher, and he could beat half the guys in the top 10 on the right night. And in terms of Donald Brashear, another controversial. He's very controversial with fight fans because his fighting style was deemed
so obscure and kind of like it. Kind of I'm not gonna say a certain word, but he could have went about it a different way. He as you said, like doing the bear hug, if you will. Expand on that because it is quite interesting.
Well, there used to be a couple great hockey message boards exclusively devoted towards fighting, and you thought I was detailed in my knowledge. They had guys that made me look like I'd never watched a game before.
So I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg is what you're saying.
Oh, there's some guys out there right now who are probably emailing you. Please get me on to combat what that jackass is saying. But Brashear was hated by a lot of fight fans because he was deemed a boring fighter. He would hug you. He would literally put you in a bear hug and give you these noogies. Very few times did he engage in a rock'em sock'em type of fight. But in his prime, he was probably, in my opinion, the champ a little bit before LaRock. He didn't lose too many fights. He fought. I guess why fans have a varying opinion on him is he seemed to fight not to lose more than. Like a Joey Koster would throw everything he had with that right hand to win.
Yeah, it was just it didn't matter how he won as long as he won.
Oh, absolutely. So, it's one of those controversial ways of looking at a guy. He didn't lose too many fights, but he didn't really have a lot of dominating like KOs that like say LaRock had. Or Bugard, even a guy like Steve McIntyre, or when, he didn't, there's a famous fight between Darren Kimball and Troy Crowder, which it was really outside of the Probert fights, one of the only defeats Troy Crowder had in his reign of terror that year, because Kimball just threw rights, head down, took a few shots, And believe me, you didn't want to take shots from Crowder, but Kimball was fighting to win. So that's why Kimball is a very popular fighter with fight fans because of his style, whereas Brashear was polarizing for his style. I think that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And unless there's any other guys you'd like to add to, I think we can really just get rolling into the evolution of the game. And then when we kind of get to the point of bringing up some jersey manipulation, especially with the one on the wall behind you, we can expand on that further, because it is truly fascinating to me how the evolution of Enforcers has, right in front of us over these past couple of years. You would know, especially being able to witness, and for your sake, being fortunate enough to witness these different decades when it comes to hockey players, hockey enforcers, if you will. And it's definitely a lost art, and that is something that can be very controversial. There are a lot of people that believe that fighting should not be part of the game for so many different reasons regarding health. And I perfectly understand that argument, but it's so innate and ingrained with what hockey is since the beginning. And it's one of those things where I never have been under the belief, nor will I really ever be under the belief, that it shouldn't be not part of the game today. And to an extent, it does upset me a little bit that we don't have kind of enforcers like we did back in the day. But I do also want any player that is going to say be willing to fight to at least be able to play some hockey, be able to skate, because we know just how raw some of these players were back in the 70s and the 80s in particular.
Oh, for sure. And like, we don't have to talk about these two guys because I want to get into this, but like, I would like to add Chris Simon.
Yep.
Has a honorable mention because in his prime he beat up Dave Brown pretty bad, and he was a huge guy, but he could play too. He was probably the closest to Probert in terms of being a player and a fighter. And definitely not this next guy, but Dave Semenko was.
Yes, I'm so glad you brought him up. I don't know why I blanked on him. I wanted to talk about him earlier too. It's fine. Yeah.
Oh no, I mean, listen, we didn't even mention Marty McSorley.
Oh my God, I know you feel stupid, but it's like it's an embarrassment of riches, at least when it comes to this subject, because there are so many vastly different enforcers through the decades. You can get lost in just one decade alone, and then realize, oh, I have another 30 years I'm dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like when Rolling Stone does the greatest guitar players of all time, and the one time they did, I know it's not a music podcast or show, but like the one writer was clearly probably around your age, and so he listed a lot of alternative guitar players.
Oh, it's like nothing old school, which is what the most important stuff is when it comes
to
that topic.
He had Eddie Van Halen ranked at 76.
That's disgusting. Don't even stop talking.
Yeah, so I mean, I think Semenko, he was Gretzky's bodyguard for a long time, and he was more intimidating than he was a great fighter. But no one wanted to go near Gretzky because you look over at Semenko and he's got the stubble and he looks like he's chewing tobacco, which I'm sure he was back then. He didn't play with a helmet, so he had this weird balding mullet going on, and
the ideal male figure.
Yeah, he had the male pattern baldness, but he had a mullet going on too. So, one more guy, because he had a great rivalry with Semenko, and I'll stop, is Tim Hunter of the Calgary Flames.
Yes.
Primarily, he was, he won some, he lost some, but, probably one of my favorite YouTube clips is in a Battle of Alberta. It's Dave Brown's on Edmonton at this point. And Tim Hunter's playing for Calgary, and they're sitting next to each other at the end of the benches, and you can hear the mic and how they're talking to each other. And Tim Hunter, I know this conversation word for word. He's looking at Dave Brown going, "So you're trying to do your job, are you?" And Dave Brown's looking at him going, "Hey, you got cement in those gloves, Timmy? They're not coming off tonight." It was just great to hear this back and forth. You very rarely hear NHL players mic'd up, and Tim Hunter was another one who fought a lot, and I don't know if I'd put him in a top 15. He's probably 20 to 30, but another very, very tough guy.
Yeah, no, great at it as well. But wrapping that up now, let's talk about the evolution of an NHL enforcer that we've been preaching. It's the title of this video that you guys will obviously know by now, but it is truly fascinating to me. So how would you like to break this down? Do you want to break this down on, say, a broader spectrum of things, labeling kind of just what the average figure of what an enforcer was starting in the 70s and then the 80s and 90s to 2000 present day type thing, and adding just mentioning the more notable guys from each decade in a summary? Or do you want to focus more on a one particular team as an example of just how much it has changed? Whichever works best for you is what I will ride with.
Well, we can kind of do a hybrid of both of those, like
Okay.
I think we kind of forgot, the NHL has been around a long time. There
Yeah,
were some
right.
certainly very tough players in the 60s and 50s as well. I mean, John Ferguson was like the Probert of his generation in the 60s, and Gordie Howe was a very tough guy.
Yeah, it's easy to overlook that because Gordie Howe, the first thing you normally don't think of is fighting, even though the supposition could be, well, the guy is known for the Gordie Howe hat trick, which is a fight, a goal, and assist. So
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that real fast. I think we basically started this conversation in the mid 70s to today.
yep.
There's definitely some tough guys in the 50s and 60s and 40s. I wasn't around for those, but I think really starting this conversation in the mid 70s when fighting certainly seemed to be more prevalent. You have to really kind of start with the Big Bad Bruins. Obviously, they had very, very tough players, and Terry O'Reilly, and then you had the Flyers, St. Louis, the Rangers, the Kings had a lot of tough guys. So I think it was the decline really started after the 70s, maybe mid 80s, where it was more every team had 4 to 5 legit fighters, maybe not heavyweights, but like, you're taking Philly, for example, you had Dave Schultz. He was the guy. But then you had Bobby Clark, Moose DuPont, Bob Kelly, Frank Bathe, Paul Holmgren into the 80s,
Yep.
Ben Wilson, Glenn Cotton, and then the Rangers kind of got their group of 5-6 tough guys, from Beck to Hospodar to the Maloney brothers to Eddie Johnstone to McPhee. And so I think in the 70s and 80s, you could kind of combine those two decades. It was more of a pack mentality.
Yes, I completely agree.
Almost like the Bloods and the Crips and, the Mexican mob, they were all building their rosters. Whereas it seemed, it seems almost with each decade it started to decline a little bit because I think the NHL, there were so many bench clearing brawls in the 70s and early 80s that, someone from the league is like, hey, we know fighting sells tickets, but this is ridiculous, that they should be able to play the game too.
Yeah, it's like, all right, we get it. This is an entertainment business, but we would still like to show some skill at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, you had guys like, I think Jay Caulfield, who was started with the Rangers, ended up being kind of Mario Lemieux's bodyguard for a little bit. I think he started skating at like 15. So
that just made me think of, and not to expand on this more, but Ed Jovanovski, the former captain for the Florida Panthers, I don't believe he actually started skating until he was 16 or 17. Like a remarkable story. It's very rare, far and few in between, when you see hockey players hit the NHL level after waiting so long in their lifetime to skate, let alone even be a solid hockey player.
Oh yeah, I mean but he was very, Joey Mullen, I think, who ended up with the Blues and the Rangers. He, I think, started skating roller hockey when he was 14 in Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, it's
So,
crazy.
and he certainly was one of the great U.S. born players ever, which is amazing considering his late start. But there was a player on Quebec and Chicago named Wayne Van Dorp, who I don't know if I ever saw him skate backwards, but he was gigantic. 6'4", 6'5", a head, as big as the Empire State Building, and beyond slow. I mean, like, he was slow even for the 80s. So I think really the 90s, you saw an evolution of guys who could at least play the game a little bit. Gone were the one-dimensional guys like a Van Dorp or a Caulfield. You had, guys like Rick Tocchet and, certainly Adam Graves. I mean, I know he's not an enforcer, but like, he would fight. You had guys on the Kings who, were serviceable, like a guy like Dean Kennedy who could fight Probert but take a regular shift. Gone were I would say, really from probably 91 to now with the one-dimensional guys, because there just wasn't a place for them in the NHL. There were still certainly many tough guys in the league up until I'd say about 2008, where they, had declined the tough guy role, and now it's virtually non-existent. Like I said, I mean, I could only think of Ryan Reeves and Curtis McDermott.
And then Tom Wilson to an extent.
Oh, absolutely. But Wilson is almost – I mean, Wilson is almost too good of a player to consider a fighter.
I know. Yeah, that's a great point.
And Reeves isn't a bad player. And I'll say this, Curtis McDermott has improved a lot. But – in Armia, I might be saying his name wrong, on Winnipeg.
Yoel Armia?
Yeah, he's pretty tough.
He's with
I'm thinking
with Montreal now.
I stand corrected. I was talking about Lowry.
Adam Lowry. Oh, okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
But he fought Ryan Reeves, and he didn't beat him, but he didn't lose to him.
Yeah, he's another big body forward. He's not one to necessarily drop the gloves constantly, as most players in the NHL aren't. But, again, as you mentioned, it really is a lost art, because if we're thinking about guys in the NHL today that I could think of, or at least over the past 5 years, you think of the Cody McLeods, you think of the Michael Haleys, you think of, during the 2000s at least, Matthew Barnaby's, you think of, many guys, and it truly is fascinating. And I want to know your thoughts in particular as to what the biggest difference maker has been from each decade. So you alluded to back in the 70s and 80s how it was really a pack mentality, which I completely agree with. When we look at the Flyers, for instance, having upwards of 8+ guys in that lineup that were all ready to defend themselves. You have the Detroit Red Wings to an extent, the same thing, at least with their duo in both Kosher and Probert, and the Rangers have their own thing going on as well. So what would you say, especially when you hit the the end of the 80s, gain into the 90s, and then the 2000s present day, from those decades in particular, what are the most drastic changes you've seen in the evolution of the Enforcers?
Well, you almost might say the de-evolution of.
I agree. I completely agree. Yep.
It's it makes me sad, but I just think the league, I think, was looking at the NBA and going, okay, they get a lot of publicity out of high-scoring games, like the Showtime Lakers and San Antonio Spurs type game attack, that they would fast breaks and all that. So I think the league was we're too slow. Like all this fighting and rough stuff, it slows down the game. And
it really does.
Hockey, let's be honest, it's not popular in America like the other three sports. So I think
it's so unfortunate, because it's just how amazing this sport is. And I'm trying to say that unbiasedly, as I host a hockey channel right now, talking to a diehard hockey fan, but it is truly unlike anything else I could begin to tell you.
Oh, it really is. It's a shame it's not more popular in America, but and this is another maybe episode why it's not. It's just not a great TV sport. For outsiders.
Correct. Everyone's like, I don't love watching it on TV, but every time I get a chance to go to a hockey game, I have a great time. That's always the line I hear.
I often tell people hockey is like the group Kiss, of which I'm a big fan of. If you put on a Kiss CD, you're not really wowed by the music. You're like, all right, this is okay. But you see them play that same song live, and you're like, this is the greatest group of all time.
Yeah.
Because they got the bombs and the explosions and the lasers and the blood. And
it's
and
the
I think
experience that is what matters most.
I think hockey is very much the same way, where you could watch a game on TV and if you're a casual fan, the puck is kind of hard to follow. But you live, you get the energy, and then hockey's really the only sport that's played nonstop. Like there aren't a lot of breaks in the action unless
it's relentless.
Is an offside or the puck goes out. It's pretty much nonstop. I mean, football, there's obviously a play and then 30 to 40 seconds in between every play. Baseball can be boring with, some baseball games take up to 3 to 4 hours. Hockey just live is magical. But so I think the NHL was like, okay, we got to get rid of guys like Jay Caulfield and, Wayne Van Dorp and, the Roberge brothers. And they're entertaining to watch, but I don't think between the four of them, they're going to score 2 goals this year. So I think it went more towards a skill-based, way of scouting players. And, you can almost see a year-by-year decline in fighting and certainly with the number of fighters that were drafted, like this year, I don't think one quote unquote tough guy was drafted.
I can actually tell you one, but it's definitely more along the lines of a Tom Wilson, if you will. And he is from the New York Rangers, ironically. When the Rangers traded with the LA Kings, as you would know, with Louis Anderson going the other way, the draft pick that they acquired, that second round pick, became a forward named Will Cooley. Will Cooley, a 20-goal scorer currently in juniors, models his game directly after a guy like Tom Wilson. So if there is one guy to actually pinpoint as possibly being that similar breed to, for the Rangers' sake of things, staying on that topic, what Brendan Lemieux is, that's probably the next closest thing. But outside of that, you're right. They're really, you aren't drafting guys to be fighting. You can draft guys for their aggressiveness, but to say that you're drafting guys solely on their fighting ability is such a thought of the past.
I mean, I think Ty Domi was drafted in the second round.
He was, yep.
And almost into the first round. I know there was teams that were thinking about it. Scott Parker, who is another guy that kind of in that Bugard, he had a brief prime. He was drafted I think 17th overall.
It's crazy.
And I know the Kings drafted several tough guys in the first round. So it's but I think it's really a worldwide in terms of hockey decline. In juniors, there's very few tough guys now. I think in the OHL that was this year they were talking about banning checking.
Don't even get me started. That's another video topic for another day.
Absolutely. But it just goes to show you. I mean, I remember, maybe the toughest king of all time, Matt Johnson, and that's another sad story that we won't get into. But
yeah, I do know quite a bit on him actually.
Yeah, I mean, the scary thing is I probably walked by him on the streets in Santa Monica and not known it was him. But he came from the OHL with the Peterborough Petes. Yeah. And so to go from a guy like Matt Johnson being drafted pretty high by the Kings to now they're talking about banning body checking. I just think the league, and sometimes I feel guilty. These guys are so much bigger now than they were back in the day. like look at Quentin Byfield, certainly not a fighter, but 6'4", 215, and you don't even really think that that's that big anymore.
I know that's a great point too. And size definitely does go in hand with the enforcer role. But I think we went also from a time to really help connect this with the enforcer mentality is guys throughout the decades were really taking advantage of their size. We had the pylons in the NHL. We had the John Scotts. We had the Boogeymans, the Derek Boogards. We had plenty of guys in that niche where the only reason why they had a job was because they were between 6'5" and up and could simply skate and they knew how to fight. But then when you have guys in today's NHL as well, they're so much more skilled. They are not focusing on that fight game aspect. They're taking advantage of their size, but they're really utilizing it more to their advantage from the skill game perspective. And that is why you're seeing guys like Quentin Byfield, who is by no means a fighter. By no means do I expect him to be a crazy dominant player when it comes to aggressiveness in his career. He might adapt that as he gets older and develops. I'm sure that's a possibility. But, that is another thing that is really becoming more of a has-been because players are getting more comfortable to really not having to worry about that one guy that's going to lay them out. Quentin Byfield being the next big thing, the face of the LA Kings, if you will, from a previous video we discussed. He's not going to have to worry about headhunters like, say, he would have even 10 years ago. It's just, that's how different things are because when you look at the decline of enforcers, it's not just affecting what the enforcer role is as a whole, it affects the entire league and the development of every aspect of a player's game.
And I also think that from just a purely visual look, the NHL, these guys are so much bigger now. And, like I was really good friends with Ken Baumgartner and still am. And Ken, I think he was drafted by Buffalo, came to the Kings in I think the Larry Playfair trade when we got him. No. And, he was 6 feet, maybe 195, 200 tops. And he was a top fighter for many years. But when he retired, is right at the era of the super heavyweights coming into the league. Ken Belanger, 6'3", 230. Chris Simon, 6'4", 240, maybe bigger. Bugard, McIntyre, Brashear, Peter Worrell, the African American enforcer, who was like 6'7", not quite as big as Bugard, but probably 230. And I think the NHL, probably someone in the league office is like, one day someone's going to get killed in a hockey fight. Yeah. We can't have that. We are already behind the 8 ball with the American audience in terms of, NFL, NBA, and the NBA, Major League Baseball. And really you could argue other sports are ahead of it, UFC, MMA in general. Yep. We can't have a death on the ice. Because I think you started really seeing some pretty severe injuries. Like I think it was Colton Orr really hurt Todd Fedoruk, and then Derek Bugard also hurt Todd Fedoruk. We're talking not just a broken nose, but fractured orbital bones. I think Todd Fedoruk has something like 6 or 7 plates in his face from all the injuries. Eric Cairns, who's another guy who, probably could have been in the honorable mention. He hurt a lot of guys. So it went from broken noses to broken orbital bones and worse. And I just think the NHL in their subtle ways found ways to make the enforcer role inconsequential. So like, even a guy like Ryan Reeves can skate pretty good for a big guy. So can Lowry. He's pretty fast. And, McDermott's not, he's not Paul Coffey, but he's not horrible either. So, I just think deep down the NHL, it's like very similar to MMA where, when I first started watching the UFC and, the guys were like my size were fighting, Randy Couture was a heavyweight and he was like,
I love Couture. Yeah.
And I don't want to, switch sports, but it's actually a very kind of similar path, whereas, UFC 1, you had guys, maybe my size, I'm 6'1", 200, whatever I am. and now you have guys like Brock Lesnar, 6'3", 280. It's scary how big the players are. So even though I love fights and I love the tough guys and I love the jerseys, or at least I did love the jerseys, it's probably better that the decline has started, because I think someone would have really gotten hurt, if not killed, with as big as these guys are getting.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head there too, to kind of wrap things up on the evolution aspect of things, because it's true. And we've already seen instances of players eventually passing away. It might not be right away on the ice, but as we've alluded to, guys like we know Boogeyman and Probert especially, they weren't, you can make arguments for some players as well outside of them that maybe it wasn't fully for the fighting, but they clearly had mental health issues as it is, between either whether it's drug abuse during their NHL careers and then after the fact, and trying to cope with everything they're dealing with. Take Daniel Carcillo, for instance, former New York Ranger as well. He's a heavy advocate for mental health because of the things that he deals with. From everything that I've learned about him and other fighters as well, it is such an uphill battle with guys that truly feel like they're in an end-all situation because of just the amount of blows that they take in their head. CTE is a real thing. This happens in other sports like football, whatever it may be. So I'm very happy that the NHL is cracking down on issues as such as this, because it's important. It is, you need to have longevity with players, and you need them to hopefully not have to worry about being in a terrible situation once they retire. So it's an unfortunate situation, because the enforcer role is in fact its own role in hockey, and it's been so ingrained for years upon years upon years in the NHL, and we have seen a drastic decline really over this past decade regarding enforcers, and it won't surprise me over these next 5 years if we literally see no more enforcers in the NHL. It's a different adaptation now, because when you think of enforcers, what exactly is the terminology behind that? Because one can make the argument that there is a difference between being an enforcer and being a straight fighter, or being an agitator. When you think of guys that really stand out there, where they're not so much as maybe a fighter, but they're agitators, they're pesky, they're a rat. You think Brad Marchand right away. You think of the younger movement, whether it's the Tkachuk brothers now in the league, which they're both fantastic in their own right. They're great overall players, but they're really pesky to go up against. And I think that is something that we're going to constantly see as more of the next wave of kind of what of a pesky power forward slash, enforcer is in today's NHL. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think the new wave of enforcers probably started with a guy like Jerome Iginla, who
great example.
Obviously he was a 50-goal scorer at one point, but he could also fight. Like he had some great fights, even with the Kings in his very brief season with the Kings. He had some great fights sticking up for Kopitar. But what bums me out the most is I don't think the NHL does it to protect the players. I think they do it to protect their image. Like
100%. If they were protecting their players, this would be a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's really you can put makeup on a horse; it's still a horse. Yep. These guys are commodities, and I think they just thought. And who's to say it's Gary Bettman? It might be Bill Daly or someone else in the league office. Although I do like having Shanahan as the head of safety, because he was, a tough guy.
He was arguably the most talented tough guy there was in NHL history.
Yeah, so I do like having him in charge, because he's actually been in fights, and he's probably been dirty at times, so he knows what the thought process is when he sees Brad Marchand stick a guy in the balls. He's like, okay, well, I remember when Claude Lemieux did that when I was playing with him, so I get the situation, and the punishment is accordingly. I think the only argument to keep fighting, and I don't think you'll ever see enforcers be brought back into the game, but is for guys like Marchand and, Tkachuk, at times can be what's labeled as dirty. I do think, there's got to be something done to take out the dirtiness of the game.
Agreed.
guys, just feel, there's no fear now because, if you were dirty against one of the Flyers' better players in the 70s, you literally knew you had 8 guys you had to answer to. And even, with Gretzky in Edmonton, you knew you had Semenko and Kevin McClellan and McSorley you had to answer to. And I think it's very telling at one point what fighting meant to the game is when the Kings did the trade with the Oilers to get Gretzky. He wanted Dave Semenko. It was the first person. He's like, listen, I want Dave Semenko. And they were like, well, no, how about we give you McSorley? He's like, all right, well, if I can't get Semenko, I want McSorley and Krushelnyski. So, I mean, fighting literally dictated the biggest trade of all time.
Just imagine how Gretzky's career would have favored if he didn't have the kind of protection that he had.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was still in an era where it was an intimidation. So if Gretzky,
this was the pack mentality still with the Oilers. They had it all. They had the perfect balance to help protect these the big names with Gretzky, Curry, and Messier, even though Messier could defend himself, among others.
But you look at what happens when you didn't have that. You can go instantly to Mario Lemieux and the Penguins.
Exactly.
His first couple of years, he didn't have anybody there. Like, he had, I think, Gary Rissling, and he was so bad even in that era they didn't play him. So, he got beat up horribly. I can only imagine if you took Mario Lemieux and put him on those Oiler teams where he knew nobody. Yeah, he knew nobody was going to touch him because he had Semenko, McSorley, McClellan, Dave Lumley, Dale Hunter's brother Dave. Like it wasn't quite the Flyers, but they were pretty close in terms of you hit Gretzky or Curry, you got half this team's going to be coming after you, not just this game, but the next 2 games we play you. So
there was definitely fear mongering going out, but like for good reason. It wasn't like this was all just BS. They were going to pull through what their motive originally was. And I love you bringing up that thought behind Lemieux, because there's always these debates between Gretzky and Lemieux. Gretzky, the great one, no one's going to compare to him ever. But there is a fair argument to be had regarding this kind of topic in particular, staying on this enforcer impact and really why it is so important. Because yes, I know the game has changed. We have definitely reached an evolution or a devolution, if you will, regarding protecting players. And there are guys out there today that we see that simply don't need protection, that their skills just make up for it, when in reality their stature doesn't benefit them from just the on-ice perspective. Take Patrick Kane, for instance. Kane, you don't see him getting laid out at all. Very rarely will you see that man get touched significantly, and that is all because of his pure skill and his hands and his overall hockey IQ. There are plenty of other guys like that in the NHL, but back then especially, you can make the argument that, yes, if you put Lemieux in the same situation that Edmonton was in with Gretzky, who knows? Could Lemieux have put up better numbers than Gretzky? Maybe. I think that's a very fair argument to be had. And what would Gretzky do in a situation in which he didn't start off his first 5-10 plus years without having that kind of protection? Would he be the great one? I think he definitely would be up there. But again, there are fair arguments to be had that maybe he wouldn't be to the stature that he is today, at least.
Well, yeah, I just think younger people really don't. And will probably never understand how important fighting was as a strategy. Like, when Gretzky came to LA with McSorley, one of their first trades was to get Jay Miller from Boston, who was he was a top 5 fighter in the league at the time. And, they just loaded that. It was so fun to watch the early Gretzky King teams because they were loaded with tough guys. You had, I think Jay Miller, Jay Wells,
Rob Blake.
Rob Blake. He was a tough guy, but like they went out and got tough guys.
Beyond him, where it wasn't as much skill as it was. Yeah, exactly what you're getting.
I mean, at one point, Larry Playfair, who was clearly at the end of his career, they still kept him and just put him at wing. He'd never played wing since he was 10 years old. But Gretzky was smart. Just surround me with my friends and everyone else have them be tough guys. And those first probably 4 years Gretzky was with the Kings were pretty magical, because it was like an older version of the Edmonton Oilers teams, where it was just skill and tough guys, nothing in the middle.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And I think we'll get to a point here in a second to conclude this video talking about the jersey behind you, because I want to make sure that we discuss those with at least 5-10 minutes left here. But regarding the Gretzky era for the Kings, how much did you have a personal impact with? Because you've been a Kings fan your whole life. How many games would you say that you actually witnessed Gretzky live for LA? Were you part of the run when they went all the way to the Stanley Cup? Like, let me know your thoughts on all that.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't miss a King game. Literally, my dad's, I don't want to bore you with my family moving around, but my dad's company at the time had season tickets. And to show you how unpopular hockey was, this is before Gretzky. So I'd say I was at the game where the Rangers and Kings had that wild playoff brawl, which
yeah, that's awesome.
That's 1981, and it's one of the greatest. And there's two versions of it on YouTube. If you just look up Rangers Kings 81 playoff brawl, it's the most amazing hockey fight clip on YouTube, because it's about 12 minutes of a bench clearing brawl, where every player is fighting. So my dad's company had season tickets to the Forum. So you got the Lakers, the Kings, the soccer team. They had an actual indoor soccer team, concerts, obviously at the Forum, and nobody wanted the hockey tickets. So I got every hockey game.
You're like, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's great. It sucked because no one else liked hockey in my dad's company, but it was good for me. And then when my parents moved to Florida in '88, as soon as Gretzky got here, my parents were like, "We're out of here." They bought me season tickets probably till about 1999. So,
oh wow.
I literally went to every King game from '88 to '99, and probably before that 60% of the games. So I was there for every King Gretzky game, and it was, you didn't appreciate it when it was happening, because it was. I think the Kings announcer Bob Miller said it best. He said, "Every night I come to work, I see something new from him," and he still had it. He wasn't quite the Gretzky in Edmonton, but he was those first, I'd say, 4 years, he was still the best player in the league by far.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then, players started, he made Bernie Nichols score 70 goals. That's how, like, Bernie Nichols was like a 20, 30 goal guy. And then, which is a lot, but, Gretzky comes on board and he scored 70 goals. It's crazy.
I know you can't see it, but I'm just throwing it up because I've just seen it, right? It's the LA Canes Gretzky jersey I have. It's honestly my favorite jersey, which is funny considering I'm not a Canes fan. But one, I've always loved these. They're my favorite. I honestly prefer these kind of style jerseys over their traditional, their purple and their yellow. But no, there's something about that Gretzky Canes era that just always stood out to me. And while, yes, he wasn't able to bring them a championship, as we all know, but he really just implemented. It was just such a controversial thing between everything breaking down with that trade. It was literally like unbelievable drama, as you know more than I do. And then just the complete impact that he had as a guy where you never would have thought, oh my God, Wayne Gretzky, literally the face of hockey that will always go down as the face of hockey, could be dealt. That really set up the spectrum where, okay, if Gretzky can be dealt, literally any player on the planet could be. So it was just such a monumental thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never see a trade of that magnitude that literally put hockey from the back pages of the sporting event or sport newspaper to the front page. I mean, I think the next week it was at the cover of Sports Illustrated. You had Wayne Gretzky with Magic Johnson.
That's crazy.
And the Kings were good. It was kind of good timing because the Kings started to do good when the Lakers were declining. So
it was a kind of easy transition.
Yeah, it was LA for like 4 or 5 years was a hockey city. I mean, you could not get tickets to the Kings. Even like a Tuesday night game against the Hartford Whalers would sell out. and it was just, I'll never forget, like 2 days before the trade happened, my friend who worked for the Kings, he's like, "Hey man, I'm not really supposed to tell you this, but we're going to get Gretzky." I'm like, "You're crazy, man. It's stuff."
What are you smoking?
And for those, and 2 days later we got him. But the anticipation in LA, those 2 days in between, like that phone call and the trade, was just, because it started to leak that it was more and more of a reality. I don't think I've ever seen LA be so excited about something. And LA, it's a great hockey town from the standpoint of the hardcore King fans are amazing. But for those first few years, LA was the center of the hockey world, which is crazy to say that. But it was, because the Kings were doing anything they could to win. We needed an upgrade in goalie. We traded for Kelly Rudy. We needed tough guys. We went out and got every tough guy we could get. Gretzky wanted a checking center. We got Steve Kasper from Boston, probably the best checking center in the league at the time. I think Gretzky was getting guys he hated playing against. So it was just a magical time, and kind of sad, because you realize now that behind the scenes, Bruce McNall, who was the Kings owner at the time, was a complete business fraud. And, he bankrupted this team for the Kings were affected in the mid 90s horribly by his financial wackiness. I don't even know of a word to say it. They were so bad financially at one point that stick and glove companies weren't delivering equipment because they weren't getting paid. So it was
the first thing that comes to mind for me, just, again, not to go on a tangent here, but when you think of, business owners, cap casualties type thing, I think, because I'm a New York Mets fan for baseball, with the Wilpons and Bernie Madoff, the whole situation, that really did not sit too well with the organization these past 20 years. They have a new owner finally, but I completely hear you there on that front, especially. It can be detrimental when owners have something awry happen such as that.
Oh, it was brutal. I mean, I felt so bad, among King fans. If you ask people who the worst GM in the history of the team is, that most will say Sam McMaster, who was the GM of the Kings after the Stanley Cup run to about 97, I think. And, I thought he was an amazing GM given the conditions he was working under. Mm-hmm. How do you go out and make trades when you can't get the sticks delivered?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And he made one of the greatest trades in King history, getting Matthias Nordstrom and LaPerriere from the Rangers.
Yep.
And of course, the Gretzky trade to St. Louis wasn't the best trade because, but look at those conditions. Gretzky said, "I want to leave." So what do? You have to trade him. So it was, as great as getting Gretzky was, it almost, sometimes part of me goes, okay, if we never traded for him and we kept Jimmy Carson and we kept Martin Jellies and we kept those 3 first-round picks, would we have been better off long term? Who knows? Maybe not, maybe. So it's, from 88 to say 98, the Kings were a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah, I can only imagine. It was really cool to kind of get an in-depth look from your perspective as one that really lived through it all, which is really awesome. But before we go ahead.
If I could say one more thing, just to show you how bad Bruce McNall was toward the end. He lived in the same apartment building as me at one point.
Are you serious?
I mean, this is a guy who bought the Pickfair house, which, I don't want to turn this into a real estate show, but
it's been everything at this point. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the Pickfair house in Los Angeles is one of the most iconic pieces of real estate still to this day, because it was owned by Mary Pickford, the movie star from the 20s and 30s. So he goes from living in that to living in my apartment building in Century City.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
A nice guy, though. He'd always say, "Hey, Earl, how you doing?" I'd be like, I'm better than you, Bruce.
That's great. Seriously. But all right. So before I let you go, we need to break down real quick for at least 5 minutes the jersey behind you and basically how NHL Enforcers were able to manipulate and stylize their jerseys to give them an unfair advantage.
Now, I will put this jersey on at the end just to show you the wackiness that it entails.
And just remember, guys, this man has 700 game-worn jerseys, and you're getting a clip at least of one of them. So maybe you'll see more in the future on the channel. Who knows?
Well, hopefully not, because that means I will sold them all. But that's another podcast. But if you, we talked earlier about sleeve manipulations. Now, this is a Link Gates jersey, who is one of the all-time what could have been enforcers. He was destined to be the next Bob Probert, but he had a lot of issues with, let's just say, substances. And he basically ended up going from a second-round pick. And there's the great quote from Lou Nanne, who was the GM of the Minnesota North Stars, who said he drafted Mike Modano in the first round. He drafted Link Gates to protect Mike Modano in the second round, and he drafted a lawyer in the third round to protect Link Gates because he showed up to the draft with 2 black eyes because he got into a bar brawl the night before.
Oh, Jesus.
So if you, and I don't know how this is going to look on my computer, but I'll do my best. If you see this sleeve, it looks unnormally large. So I'm going to put the jersey on real fast. He had custom sleeves where the team, now this is a jersey from that Goon League.
Jersey?
Yes.
Okay.
This is a jersey from the team he played on in Quebec. It's like the very infamous Goon League.
Yep.
And look at how big this jersey is.
That's ridiculous. Oh my God.
Like if you, so the sleeves are actually sewn on backwards. So I'll assume the equipment trainer cut the sleeves about right here, and for whatever reason they're backwards. So as you can imagine, I'll squat down. Maybe I'll put this up here. Like, so I can't stress how big this jersey is on me. Now I'm about 6'1", say 200 pounds, and
that
this
would be
is
a complete dress on me.
You can't even see my fingers. My fingers are fully extended right now, and you can't even see them. So you can see. So imagine if you're fighting, and we're like this, and you grab the sleeves, say right here. What's going to happen? It's going to be like that. So I can still throw punches at you. And the sleeve or the neck, and once again, I don't know how this is going to look.
You're doing great.
It's got like this, you can feel it's like a rubber band or an elastic extension in here. So if you grab the shirt, it literally goes down to there, and you've got nothing to grab on. Like,
there's no leverage on any aspect of that jersey.
Right. Like most jerseys would say be like this, and they'd be hard to grab. But this one, it's like you can pull it almost to my chest bone down here. And if you can see this, there is
the fight strap.
Well, it's a skate lace. It's not a regular fight strap. It's a quarter that's bunched up with a skate lace.
Oh, I saw on the top part.
Yeah. So let me see. Here.
Yeah, I see it. Yep.
That's a quarter right there.
That's crazy.
So if you pull on the jersey hard enough, it's almost like the Rob Ray effect, where the jersey will just come. Like, look how easy this will come. Let me take my hat off. It goes like that.
Oh, yeah. Especially with all the gear on, it'll still be as smooth.
Oh, it'll come off like butter. And then you're looking at fighting Link Gates, who's 6'3", 260 pounds. I mean, he was a big dude. Now not all shirts are this heavily customized, but his are among the most sought after shirts and by tough guy collectors, because there's always something wacky with his jerseys, either the extended sleeves, the elastic in the neck, the fight straps. Some of his shirts have actually two fight straps, one in the back and one like right here. So they're incredibly tight. Brashear had that as well. Probably the wackiest customization I have is Francis Lassard, who is he plays in that wacky goon league now, still to this day.
I'm going to watch the documentary as soon as we're done recording this, and you guys should too. I'll even put in the description down below as long as I remember. But continue.
Well, Francis Lassard and every one of his, from the Atlanta Thrashers to the Rangers to Phoenix to his Quebec League jerseys, has his all of his shirts are sewn the neck. So it's the complete opposite of that jersey, where it's like a turtleneck on him, and you can't pull the jersey over his head because it's like almost like the Dave Brown sleeve customization, where it was basically sewn to his skin. So if you don't even have, you can't even grab Francis Lassard's jersey because it's so like, it's literally like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So, and the few jerseys I have of his, I can barely put it on because it won't open up enough for my big head to like fit in it. So, and I'm trying to think of some of the more infamous jersey customizations. Of course, Basil McRae with the Velcro sleeves. I do have a funny Linkgate story, actually. I'll make it quick.
Go ahead.
He calls me up one day.
Really?
And to this day, I don't know how he got my phone number. And I could tell he might have had a few beverages, if you know what I'm saying. And he's like, yeah, is this the guy in Los Angeles who collects my jerseys? And I'm like, yeah, who's this? He's like, this is Link. I'm like, no, it's not. And I asked him a few questions that only Link Gates would know. And
that's so funny.
Like, well, fuck it, man. I got a box of jerseys in my garage. What's your address? And I'm like, I gave him my address. I'm like, how much do you want for them? He's like, I don't want them anymore. I'll just give them to you. And then he puts me on the phone with his mom. And, his mom was, I could tell, was pretty old, I'll guess 70s at that time. And she's like, Earl, my son Link is just misunderstood. He's really a great boy. He's a great son. He's a great father. And then the next day he got kicked off the team he was on for a bar brawl. So,
oh my God.
That's probably one of my favorite. Like,
did he actually send you them?
Of course not. You think Link Gates is going to go to the post office and fill out a customs form to send
That's asking for too much, clearly.
Well, probably, and you could look at the picture on Google. There, he was such a wacky dude that I think he was playing in that jersey I just had on, and he wasn't playing a lot because in this goon league he would only get paid to fight, so he played maybe 2 shifts a game, 3 maybe. He was so bored one game, he got up, left the bench, went into the lobby, and got a hot dog. And there's a fan who took a picture with him at the concession stand where he's in his game jersey eating a hot dog.
Here, wait, you can't see it, but I'm showing the photo to everyone right now on the screen just from my phone so they can get an idea what Link Gates looks like. Fairly recently, at least. Definitely a little bit heavier set, to say the least.
But so talented. Like, he got into a motorcycle accident where he I don't think he was wearing a helmet, so he lost a fair amount of his motor skills, which obviously you need in hockey. So he went from a Bob Probert like player to just being a a Wayne Van Dorp one-dimensional enforcer, and he literally played on, I think, something like, if you look his name up on hockey database, like 30 plus teams in his career, and that's that they know of. I think there's actually more that he played on 1 or 2 games and got kicked off.
That's remarkable. I want to find out everything about this man's life now that you've explained so much to me. I'm looking forward to this rabbit hole, if you will.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I think Nick Fotiu at one point was his coach.
No
and,
way. Get out. Are you serious?
I forget what team. I think it was a junior team. I'm trying to think. It's the hard thing is he played on so many teams. It's hard. It was a minor league team, not junior team. And even Fotiu was like, I gave up after a while. He was just too much. Wow. It's kind of, he's still alive. That's good, I guess. But it's sad when you see someone who had the potential to be like a kind of a mixture of Bob Probert and Rick Tocchet,
There's nothing worse than kind of wasted potential to an extent. I think that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah, because he was a good player, like for a tough guy. Kind of like a Joey Kocur type. He probably could have scored 100 goals if he would have played in the league 10 years. But just let the demons get to him, and so it is funny that his jerseys are probably second to Probert's amongst collectors in terms of because he's kind of like he's got this. This is definitely the wrong comparison, but he's got like that Bin Laden like. Like you heard of Bin Laden, but you never saw him, and it's like. I know that's a horrible analogy, but like with Gates, even though he played on so many teams, not a lot of people saw him play.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to look at things. You're not wrong.
Yeah, that's a horrific analogy.
I know. No, it's perfectly fine. You're not wrong at the end of the day. However, you were blunt and to the point. I completely picked up what you were putting down. But no, that was everything about what you explained regarding Link Gates and just throughout this conversation was fantastic. I'm really hoping that there was a good amount of people that decide to continue to watch this video as we hit like the hour and 12-minute mark, and same thing with our previous video and our first video with the Canes, even though the video got messed up in that when it came to your actual video. But seriously, this was awesome, Earl. If there's anything else you want to add before I officially wrap things up, by all means go for it, and let people know your handles too, because we gotta make sure that people find you.
Well, first off, thank you for letting me come on your show and talk about this. For I think now we've done 3 episodes and probably close to 4 hours of talk, which has been awesome. And this, like I said, wacky time. It helps to have stuff like this to do, and
no better time to do it.
It's hopefully we send people down a Link Gates wormhole, and Troy Crowder, and look up some of these guys we met. Look up all of them. Their fights are all on YouTube now in digital form, so it's great clarity. I remember, I had to watch their fights early on. In hockey fight tapes with really shitty quality VHS tapes, but now with the advent of YouTube and the games are all taped on high def and 4K TVs and cameras, so it's really amazing to watch them in such clarity. So but in terms of my comedy, if you like what I do, I'm just at Earl Skakel on all social media. That's EARLSKAKEL. If you stream cartoons, you can go to Adult Swim for free, I believe, and watch the Jellies, and go on Comedy Central and put in my name, comedycentral.com, and you'll see all my roast battles. And I'm starting to put more content up on YouTube, but if you're in LA, I do stand up a lot at the Comedy Store. So got to wait for the country to open up again, I guess, to see me there. But, I accept all friend requests. You got any questions on comedy or hockey that Tyler can't answer? Send me a DM. I answer everyone.
Yeah, seriously, you're fantastic, Earl. I hope to do more things with you in the future, because I know that, one, there's probably a good crowd that is enjoying these, and I know I sure as heck am, and I'm really fortunate to have this kind of friendship with you now. So thank you again. This means a lot. I really look forward to getting this video out there, and for all you lovely people, thank you so much for checking it out. And with that being said, I hope you have a great night.
Oh, thank you. And I've already thought of the next topic. You know, now that fighting's eliminated, pretty much, we could maybe do a top 10 agitators.
Ooh.
So,
There you go. You heard it here, folks.
There's more than enough guys, from Brad Marchand to Ken Lensman to Mel Bridgman to Ian LaPerriere. There's a million of those guys. So thank you, Tyler, for introducing me to your fan base, and hopefully my fans become your fans. And I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Awesome. Thank you again. What a conversation. I hope you guys enjoy that one as much as I did. Seriously, Earl Skakel is a gem. You got to make sure you follow this guy. I'll have all of his handles every which way you can find him between his podcast, his shows, his actual YouTube channel, everything in between I'll have in the description down below. So make sure you check him out. And if you enjoy this kind of hockey content, if you want to see these kind of discussions going forward, I know that they are lengthy, but for good reason. These are in-depth breakdowns with a guy who has more hockey knowledge regarding these kind of topics in particular than I could simply comprehend or even imagine, for that matter. So make sure to hit like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of hockey content. Stay tuned for more great videos on the channel regarding more top 10 rankings I'll be doing with other teams' individual prospect pools. Expect a top 10 for agitators as well, as he mentioned. That's going to come to fruition. I know it for a fact. So many great things are happening on this channel. I'm so happy to have you a part of it, guys. So let me know your thoughts in the comments below. How did you enjoy this video? And I'll catch you guys real soon.